to give a little bit of history. I was going to start with when they moved to Dayton in '82. However, I do have to share a little bit because of the last couple days. Actually, Michelle started it, but I have to finish with, I remember as a little girl, when we lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and I walked with my dad to protest the Vietnam War. So that was my first inkling of my parents' social justice and advocacy. Then we moved to this little hick town called Yorkville, Illinois. And if nobody knows Yorkville, Illinois, when we moved there in 1971, there was 13,000 people in this town, 3,500 in the whole county. So I'm like, what, as a 13-year-old, what did my parents do to us, moving us to this little town after being in the suburbs of Chicago? So, to make a light of this, I'm like, the first Sunday, there was this cute little boy, and I'm like, I guess this is okay. So, but the advocacy my parents did there, basically my father, he actually did low-income senior apartments. He fought and fought in a subdivision that we actually lived in. There was some land, and what can we do? So I'm not sure how many apartments were built, but there was actually apartments built for low-income seniors. And that really was an impact. But actually, after the celebration on Thursday of Juneteenth, there was actually an article in the Chicago Tribune about the Yorkville Congregational Church, where my dad preached for 10 years. And what it said was that they had a Juneteenth celebration. So it was really exciting to see that after 1,300 people, I think there's about 15 or 18,000 now, but there was no African Americans back in the day. So my parents' advocacy for love and acceptance to all there made an impact on a small county in Illinois. Then comes 1982, when they moved to Dayton. And for some of you Oak Creek people who didn't know what back then, Mark Bueller was the minister. And they invited my parents to spend the night at their house because their furniture hadn't come. So then the first Sunday, Dad said, we might as well join the church. So they actually joined Oak Creek, so it's a whole circle of how they ended their life here. So during that time, they were very, very instrumental in starting P-Play. Them and the Wilgers were two families that really thought that we needed celebration for the population, and they went ahead and did that. And it's still going strong right now. In fact, to make that a full circle, I understand my niece has just joined the board. So that is really exciting about that as well. But through the years, Dad was president of PFLAG for many, many years. And then looking at Rochelle, I had just said to her, I think Mom and Dad were taught some classes with Rochelle and were on panels at Miami University. And Dad also did a lot of work at UD with Dr. Peterson to talk about sex education and coming out with that. Now, with my mom, some of you all know, and I believe that most of you have gotten them from her, many, many hugs. Dad too, but Mom was the mom of moms. She mothered so many people that had come out, not come out yet, and they were very instrumental in doing all that. So I'm really honored that the church really wanted to do the Clary Award because to represent them. And this is really an emotional 2 weeks for us because on June 30th, Dad passed away 4 years ago. And we kind of talked about, wow, June 30th, he did not want to miss a day of Pride Month. And then July 12th will be the first year of Mom's passing. So she was able to not be here, but see the first Clary Award, which Rochelle had received, and very thankful that Rochelle then did go to the nursing facility and spend some time with Mom, and she got to see what the award looked like. So I'm going to stop, but we are very honored to have Andy be the recipient of this award, and Rochelle is going to talk about Andy herself.
I can't have my back to anybody or the door. I'm Italian, so I'm going to go over here. Yeah, especially door. Are you sad? I don't have a PowerPoint. Are you sad that I didn't bring a PowerPoint? Hi, friends. Just reflecting quickly before I talk my stuff about Miss Andy Hawk, I just want to say last year was a great year, and the prompt that you gave me with the Clary Award is to stay mindful, stay vigilant, keep moving, and make a path for social justice. And I'm honored to have received the award. And this past year, I hustled. I just want you to know. So, Andy, it's a year. Good luck. And I think what you'll hear is I don't know how she can do any more than she already does. So, good morning, everyone. We come together to celebrate someone whose quiet strength, tireless dedication, and boundless compassion have left an unforgettable mark on our community. It is my absolute honor to present the Clara and Larry Rezash Equality Advocacy Award to someone who has not only advocated for equality, but lived it, embodied it, and shown up for it every single day. There's a phrase, give us our roses while we're still here. Andy, your presence has been a gift, an ever steady, ever giving presence in nearly every corner of the Q+ community here in Dayton. By the way, when I say community, I want you to see a Q and a plus and then the community, got it? And larger community as well. You serve on the board of PFLAG Dayton. You serve on the board of the Q+ Youth Center. You serve on the board of Closet Transformation, and you have supported the LGBTQ+ Health Alliance for years. You've shown up to lift chairs and spirits, to sort clothes and create safe spaces, to organize and educate, to speak and to listen. And even more remarkably, you don't seek the spotlight. You just get shit done. Reliably, lovingly, and authentically. Your fellow advocates, there were several of us that wrote in to say, we think Andy deserves this award. I think the last count, I think there were 10 of us that said, hey, we got to see Andy. So your fellow advocates describe you as omnipresent, a role model, and a servant leader. Someone who bridges communities, faith and Q+, youth and elders, allies and activists. Someone who's not afraid to get their hands dirty, setting up rooms before meetings, facilitating support groups, and offering a calm, welcoming smile that tells people you belong here. People describe Andy as everywhere at once. One nominator said, when I walk into a community event, Andy is one of the first people I look for, and I always find her. That says so much about her. She is a source of calm and comfort and of belonging. But it's not just about being physically present, it's the way she brings her full self to every room, thoughtful and grounded and warm. She leads not with ego, but with empathy, not with a loud voice, but with a steady one. Andy builds bridges, holds space, and helps others shine. And what strikes me most is that Andy doesn't seek recognition. In fact, she's probably cringing a little bit right now. And that's exactly one of the reasons why she deserves this award. Because this award, the Clary Award, is meant to honor those who fight for equality, not for applause, but because it's the right thing to do to fight for equality, because they believe in a better world and work every day to bring that better world closer for all of us. Andy, your impact ripples outward from young people exploring their identities to elders seeking belonging. You've helped countless people feel seen, heard, and valued. You've created community, and not with grand gestures, but a consistent, powerful presence. So this morning, we give you your roses. Thank you for being the kind of advocate who leads with compassion, for being the kind of friend who always shows up, and for being the kind of human who makes us all believe a better world is possible, because you're already helping build it. Congratulations, Andy. This award is more than well-deserved. It's a reflection of the light you've already shined so brilliantly on our community. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So now I get to talk, I guess. I guess I should start out by telling a little bit about myself and my background, because I saw a quote recently. Toby Mack said, "Your ministry is found where you've been broken." And really, my youth, my childhood, was where I was broken. As I was born in 1960, as a trans girl, but there wasn't any such thing back then, at least not according to society, so I kind of suffered through that. And I remember at least from first grade, eighth grade, I was very well aware that I was a girl inside, even though I was smart enough to not share that opinion with anybody because they would have thought I was crazy. Spiritually, well, I grew up Catholic officially, but I think really what I was like the youngest atheist, because at that point I was kind of of the opinion of if I can't see it, hear it, or feel it, it doesn't exist. So don't tell me about God. And that's how I felt until late in my high school years when I got saved at a Young Life meeting. If any of you have ever been to Young Life. And that was my senior year. And I'm not really sure if I was more looking for God or looking for belonging. But I found both. Went to college, went to our Air Force ROTC, and then served for 10 years in the Air Force. And then I separated and tried to make my way through life, but by that time the depression was getting really bad, which was a depression caused by gender dysphoria. I don't know if everyone's familiar with gender dysphoria and its effects, but that depression, and I mean I felt it when I was in high school and even grade school, but it was building and it was building, and by the time I was in my 40s, it really was getting unmanageable. It really was like, I don't know how I would have handled this. And from there, things really went downhill. And so I ended up getting more and more depressed, found it harder and harder to work, less and less money, until eventually in 2017, I became homeless, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because as a veteran, I could go to the VA, which has really a wonderful homeless facility. I mean, it's still a homeless facility. I'm not trying to say you ought to go on vacation there. But compared to the other facilities, which I experience because in order to qualify for the VA, for VA's homeless facility, you had to spend one night in a homeless facility outside to certify that you were really homeless. And the contrast between what anyone else faces, the conditions, assuming they're in a shelter at all, which many homeless folks are not in a shelter, but that the VA is such a wonderful alternative for veterans. And that led me to an experience that basically changed my life, which was coming out as trans. By that time, I had figured out that there is such a thing as trans, and I really am. But when I was in the VA homeless facility, I was going for mental health help for my depression, and they were treating me for anxiety and depression, cause unspecified, just blah, blah, blah. And it really wasn't going anywhere, and I realized that if I wanted it to go anywhere, I was going to have to tell them my secret. And this is a secret that I had never told anyone up until that point. And I was, 57 at that point? Or 56. I turned 57 about a week after I left the VA homeless facility. But I was 56 and had never told anyone. And I just told them, I said, I'm going to have to tell you something. If I promise it's not something that falls under mandatory reporting, can you promise to keep it a secret? And because I knew about mandatory reporting, because during my depression, I did manage to get qualified as a lay minister in my church, which put me under that category. And so I learned about that. But the VA said, yes, as long as it's not something we're required to report. And I told them. Just kind of crossed my fingers and crossed my toes and crossed my eyes and came out and just said, I'm transgender. And I was expecting suddenly to have the cops burst in and haul me away or something. I don't know if that's what I was expecting or not, but I got nothing but support. As it turned out, this VA psychologist that I was speaking to had recently come from another VA down in, I think it was Atlanta, it was somewhere in the South, where she had been in charge of the transgender program down there. So I mean, God can do some amazing things sometimes, just putting the right person at the right place at the right time. And so then she's asked me, have you thought about transitioning? I said, well, I thought about it, and I'd really love to, but it's just too complicated. It's just too hard. I could never really make it work. And she said, why not? So what is so hard? Tell me about this. And eventually we concluded that I could, and I did. And on July 5th, 2017, which is the day after the 4th of July, I remember it so clearly, I walked out of that VA facility presenting as male and walked into my new apartment that the VA had helped to secure for me, presenting as female, and I never looked back. Never went back after that. And at that point then I started to say, now what am I going to do? What am I going to do here? I mean, I can't just sit around and read Facebook all day and have that be my life. I was retired by the VA as a VA retiree, so I was getting VA income. And the first thing I did actually was I saw an ad on Facebook looking for people to help out with the Transgender Day of Remembrance that year. And that was the first thing I showed up for, and since said that I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing here, but I'm willing to help. And I also went back and recertified at my church as a lay minister. That had expired during the time I was in depression. And so that took me another couple of years to go through the classes again to recertify for that. And shortly after that, I went to a PFLAG meeting And I tell this story to people like sometimes when they ask what's your original experience with Pete like. But the thing that got me there was it was the Christmas dinner and it was advertised free food. And there's no better way to get me to show up someplace than to offer me free food. So thank you today for the food. And not too long after that, I heard about this new thing that was being created. That Jerry Mallicote, the late Jerry Mallicote, who we all miss greatly, I know, was starting a Q Plus Health Alliance. Or they didn't say Q Plus back then, that kind of evolved, but it was LGBTQ Plus Alliance, Health Alliance. And so there was going to be a focus group for trans people just to help contribute to this thing. And so I showed up with the focus group, and I got talking to Jerry afterward, and he said, would you like to join my Health Alliance? And I said, well, sure, why not? When do I have to be there? He says, tomorrow morning. So the next morning at 9 a.m., there I was at the Public Health Building, ready and willing and able to be a part of the brand new Health Alliance. And out of that, I started to get involved in the Aging Summit. The first Aging Summit, I wasn't actually on the planning committee, but I was a helper that was asked to help out the day of and help to shoot people up to where they need to go to and such. And then after that, was asked to step into the planning committee. And we've had several more of those since then. They're wonderful, wonderful experiences on the aging side. And I think the next thing that I got involved with was Closet Transformation. I don't know if you all know about Closet Transformation. That is a nonprofit that provides good quality used clothing for, especially for trans people who are transitioning. And that resonated with me because when I transitioned, when I walked out of that VA back in 2017, and out of homelessness, which means I did not have a big bank account at the time. I still don't have a big bank account, but I have one now. Back then it was $10, and so I needed a brand new wardrobe. So I spent a lot of time at used clothing places and Walmart on sale and wherever I could find anything. So I really said, this is something I need to get involved in because this is something that I would have needed in my life when I was there. And I think the newest project really that I've been working on for the last couple of years, along with several other wonderful people, has been our whole Q Plus Youth project, Q Plus Youth Center, Q Plus Youth activities, and I think that is just so important too. And I'll be talking about youth at the end of my talk, and talk a little bit more then. But really, like, why do I do this? Why do I feel that it's so important to do what I do, to be involved in things? And what is so serious about this transgender and this LGBTQ thing? And really, I have to compare it in a way, don't think I'm crazy here, I have to compare it in a way with leprosy. Because leprosy is a big thing in the New Testament. You've probably heard about Jesus healing the leper in Mark 1:40-41. You're probably thinking, well, the leprosy is like the leper, hasn't that been eradicated already at this point? But see, the thing about leprosy actually, back then, was a combination of several different skin diseases. It was a combination of house mold and psoriasis, and also Hansen's disease, which is what we currently call leprosy, the current version of leprosy. But the biggest problem with leprosy wasn't that your skin was funny and it itched sometimes and you had a disease. The biggest problem with leprosy was the social isolation. The biggest problem was that you had to be cast aside and stay in your own little tent community with other lepers, and if you, God forbid, had to go into the city for any reason, you had to yell, unclean, unclean, everywhere you go, and people would go, I don't want to be around with these lepers. And you've got to believe that was a horrible experience for anybody to have to go through, even worse than having a skin rash, was this social isolation. And LGBTQ people often are in the same situation. All right, well, they don't get invited to, fortunately we have our own society anymore, but even so, don't get invited to all the same things as the other people where we work maybe, or just young people in particular just don't have the same friends, have to kind of hang out on the margins, and so I think that's really what, to me, calls out to me the most about the Q plus people is this social isolation, is this not being welcome, not belonging. Brene Brown says true belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and in standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are, it requires you to be who you are. And that's what we're doing, is offering that true belonging to the older LGBTQ people who don't have much social contact anymore. Many of their friends may have passed or may be in assisted living in another city where their children are, or whatever, and bringing this belonging to the young people who are locked up in a school every day, whether they want to be there or not, with the others who are there because they're in the same geographical area. There's really no chance to pick your socialization there, and they don't always have the most positive experience there. And trying to bring that belonging, because I think that's what Q plus folks need the most. What we can really benefit from is that belonging, because that way we can bring our gifts into society. We can bring our gifts into community, because that's what I think being around is all about, is that we all have our own unique abilities, our own unique personalities, our own unique tendencies. God is infinite, and each of us is finite. So for God to bring all of themselves and all of their talents and all of their abilities to us, they have to work through a community. They have to work through so many of us. I can't be God to everyone. I can just be a little piece of God maybe to everyone. And Rochelle may be another piece of God, and Paige may be another piece of God, and Allison may be another piece of God, etc. I mean, we all bring this together, and by doing that, we can reenact that divine presence for everyone. It won't be too much longer. I'm farther along than I thought I was. You're not. But I heard this, I saw this quote on Facebook a couple weeks ago from Nadia Bolz-Weber. She said, "The promise God is not done and that we will not be left alone still stands. This hope to which we cling is not a naive hope, nor is it an escapist hope, but quite the opposite. It's the hope of people who have heard the dangerous rumor that there is life beyond death and hope beyond suffering, and that love eventually conquers the soul-crushing bullshit we humans keep perpetuating." I heard some bullshit the other day. Just got to share this. It has to do with the Supreme Court case that failed to protect trans young people as far as receiving gender-affirming care. I think they're all so much off base on this from beginning to end, not just the Supreme Court, but everybody preparing it. They're missing the point, they're missing the compassion, they're missing what it's all about, because they're arguing whether or not this is a protected class that requires heightened scrutiny and all this discrimination legal talk. And this situation is not about discrimination, it's not about scrutiny, it's about people who need this for their happiness and in some cases even for their lives. Because trans youth who are denied gender-affirming care have a tendency to go into depression, self-harm, and in worst cases, even choose to end their own lives. And that's what this case is about. It's not about legal decisions and the theory of discrimination. It's about helping young people to survive. But they'd rather talk about the bullshit. I'm gonna close this with the prayer of St. Francis, which I think is so appropriate to what we're talking about here. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Thank you all very much for listening, and thank you especially for the wonderful award.